Sharissa.
Welcome to the Youth Enviro Show.
Yes, the first episode of many where we will be educating each other.
Yes, because it's not just about what we are going to make you aware of the environment, but we also want to hear your opinions and your ideas and what we can do better to improve our environment.
Exactly. So make sure that you are commenting throughout each and every episode, or maybe you just also want to say hi.
Yes, so don't go away and stay tuned.
What is the ozone layer?
I don't know.
And then I forget. I know. I can't tell you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Is the white thing that between is the layer between that trans I don't know.
Yeah.
Is the layer that prevent us from too much heat, too much all this
Oh, the ozone layer.
Ask
Yeah, what is ozone?
I guess that's the layer that protects us from the UV rays from the sun. It's more like a surface that protects us from too much sun.
Okay, and what is carbon dioxide?
It's breathing out. It's breathing out.
It's very cold in here, eh?
Yes,
It's
man.
really freezing.
Wait, what is happening? Because summers have become so hot. Winter is cold these days, and then it rains, but then it's snowing in the south.
Yeah, and wait. It used to rain like the first raindrop used actually to be in October, but nowadays it's in Feb. Okay, what could it be? Hey! What is it?
It's that big thing. Climate change.
Yes, climate change. That's right.
Exactly.
Yes, so in today's episode, we are going to talk about climate change. So just below, comment there, what is climate change? But before we go further, Sharissa, what is climate change?
Well, as I remember it, no, it's a joke. We obviously did our research because we are passionate about it.
Yes.
But climate change is more of like the rising in temperatures and the changing of weather patterns.
Yeah.
And this is caused because of us.
Yes, us, me and you.
Yep. You are thinking, me? You? Yeah. Because we humans are burning a ton of fossil fuels, which is creating a lot of carbon dioxide.
Yes, and with this carbon dioxide increasing in the atmosphere, deforestation is also one of the major causes of global warming. When we cut down of trees for wood, especially when the population increases, for example in the northern part of Namibia, everyone wants a nice house with wood on it. Everybody wants actually to braai outside, right? With wood and stuff like that. So this is actually increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
And actually, in some way, if you think and look at luxurious homes, the wooden furniture that we're thinking, oh, it's minimalistic, but that is also contributing to deforestation. So, Esther, what are the effects of climate change?
Yeah, Sharissa, if you look at climate change globally, the effects are evident. Let's talk about productivity. It has actually decreased due to drought, for example.
Oh, and then rising of sea levels?
Yes, and as well as polar ice melting, especially in countries which are
Where it snows, or like the Antarctics.
yes, species are being lost to extinction because there is global warming.
Exactly. And if you think about it, heat waves like the ones that the Europeans have been experiencing.
Yes, and here in Namibia, we are not excluded from global warming. In fact, matter of fact, Namibia is one of the vulnerable countries when it comes to climate change because of our weather.
Yes, because we are a semi-desert. Our dry environment contributes a lot to how we are affected by climate change.
Yes, especially when it comes to agriculture, productivity, and livestock. Due to drought, due to low food productivity, animals are actually dying more. Most of the time, we are in a food crisis, and food is not being produced as before, as well as heat now. It's too hot during summer, so climate change, it is here, and we need to do something about it.
Yes, and what are we as Namibians, or what is the government doing to combat climate change and to protect what we have left? Well, you know that in 2011, that our government actually created a climate change policy, which we will definitely get into later. That's not all. We also asked you, the public, to tell us more about climate change. So let's take it to the streets.
What do you understand about climate change?
I think climate change is a change of weather in a given period of time.
Like it's in the name itself, climate change. So it's when the climate changes drastically, suddenly it's too cold, it's too warm, or it's not supposed to be. Yes, that is it.
Well, firstly, it's the heating up of our entire planet, and unfortunately that means less rain, that means less livelihood for everybody. So climate change is a big problem.
How is climate change currently affecting Namibia?
It's affecting Namibia in this sense that due to the increase of the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the heat or the temperatures are rising, and as a result there is a high evaporation, and that leads to water bodies drying up, that leads to us receiving low rainfall. And we also have experienced drought. Like if you go deep in the rural areas or in the villages, you see that even our rainy season is a bit short now, unlike those years. So the more we cut down trees, what we call deforestation, and then it means that there is fewer trees to release water vapor in the atmosphere, then we have low rainfall as a result of that.
No, it does affect Namibia negatively. Like for instance, so floods are also okay. So floods, drought, they do really affect Namibia negatively in the sense that a lot of people lose their houses, their jobs, and I think it does affect negatively in the sense that the government doesn't really also compensate for that. Like people could be losing their houses, but then it's just there isn't money, so I think it does really affect negatively.
Weather patterns or changes in weather patterns affect farming, I think, and that is not just crop husbandry, that is farming as in to sustain ourselves further. So to drill down, I think food production, but I know we don't produce food on a large scale, but that which we produce, I think that would be hampered. I think that, and I think also it boils down to the very nature of being a human. I think we've also all witnessed the passing of the guy on Robert Mugabe when it was too cold. So I'm thinking all that it comes down to each of us. We're just not certain how it comes down to it, but yeah, that is what I want to say.
Do you think Namibia is doing a lot, and what can we do different?
Well, in Namibia, I think we're a little behind in terms of working on climate change, definitely behind. Specifically because we have many cars on the roads. Those are one of the biggest CO2 producers that we have in this country for sure. I think one would make green transportation would be beautiful if that was more affordable specifically, because accessible definitely. So yeah, that's what I think. And
first, I think we have to create an awareness to the people because majority of Namibian people, they really don't have enough information regarding climate change. I think first we have to maybe run a campaign so that we can create awareness what are the effect will the climate change will have to us as a Namibian. And I don't think we are really doing enough because most of us, we don't really have enough information about these topics.
I think awareness, a lot of awareness. Like, I mean, even now when you asked us what climate change was, we had to, you know it's there, you see it a bit here and there, but you don't know how do I change it, what do I do in my daily habits that will change it or whatever. So I think awareness would be, and I think that is what you guys are doing right now. And I'd like to commend you for it. Take it further. Yeah, but I think awareness is where we start.
So just to illustrate more about climate change, here in Namibia, for example, drought was really happening, especially 2019, whereby 300 livestock, which is cattle, died in the Maheke region. So with you, now we want to ask you, are we doing enough about climate change? Do you think that's the case? You or me as an individual and all of us as government?
Did you know that in 2011, the government actually implemented a climate change policy? But we will definitely get into that later on.
Yes, don't forget, as I said, to comment below what are we currently doing as Namibians to curb climate change. But one thing that also the government has actually introduced lately is a plastic levy. So do you know that?
We all know this plastic levy.
Yes, because before that we would buy plastic left, right. We wouldn't actually buy that.
Yeah.
We would pack our things in more plastic, and we would throw plastics left, right, and center. But now it's different.
Well, I actually remember some of us who were younger, you know, those plastic bags would create a little ball with it and play. Another thing is, you know, that was a great use of like reusing the plastic. But unfortunately, also many of us, myself included, we were wasting our plastic.
Yes, we would just throw it away. You didn't care about it. But now because of this levy, like you have to buy a plastic. It's so nice that I wouldn't just want to throw my plastic away. I have to reuse it.
Exactly.
Because it's costly. And this is actually one of the climate change mitigation, since the plastics have been reused here in our country.
And another thing is, we've all heard talks about it, is the green hydrogen.
Yes, green hydrogen, you heard it right. When it comes to renewable energy, we are being advised to use solar panels. This is actually very useful when it comes to lighting up the house, as well as when it comes to geyser, because heating up the water for us to bath, especially during this cold winters. This is very energy sufficient.
Exactly, because you don't need much except solar panels, and what do we have an abundance of? The sun.
Yes, that's correct. And apart from solar panel or solar energy, which energy can we use, Sharissa?
Wind, you know. So imagine if we had massive huge panels along our desert or among our desert that would help us generate electricity to certain parts of the country. NAM Power has implemented a green project which will be running for 5 years. It started in 2020, and this is 7 projects, 2 of which are already underway through independent power producers. These projects have recently been commissioned, which is the 20 megavolt solar photovoltaic project and the 50 megavolt wind project nearby Luderitz.
Just in case we have forgotten something and you know about it, that Namibia is currently doing to curb climate change, let's hear it below. Comments below.
Yes, enough from us. So let's hear from an expert in climate change.
as we promised you in the studio that we will meet up with a climate and youth expert. So here we are joined by a youth advocate for sustainable development goal, focusing on renewable energy and climate change. So Dion Shikuza, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show, and greetings to all of yours.
Yes. So tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, in short, I choose to identify as a youth advocating for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay.
There's 17 of them. I choose to focus on 2 in particular, SDG 13 and SDG 7, which is on climate change and renewable energy.
Okay.
In terms of climate change, I serve as a junior negotiator, attending climate change conferences where the world is discussing how to tackle the problem.
Yes.
At the same time, I also serve part of the youth constituency at the convention, and I support mobilizing youth efforts around. And then on renewable energy, we have an NGO in Namibia called NAYORE, Namibian Youth on Renewable Energy, and our idea is to support the mainstreaming of youth in the energy sector, in particular looking at employment and meaningful engagement.
Okay, very well. Since we are more focusing on youth and climate, so he's actually the perfect candidate for us to talk to today. So tell us more about climate change. What do you really understand about climate change, since we are here talking more about climate change in this episode?
Yeah, thank you for the question. First of all, most people must know that climate change is a natural process and a phenomenon that has been taking place since time immemorial.
Okay.
Looking at the chronology of the Earth's history, we would understand that the Earth goes through different phases. It was once in the ice stage, and it would continue to warm up and then fluctuate and so forth. And now what we call climate change in this particular discussion is the change in the climate that is attributed directly or indirectly to our activities as human beings. Now, how do we as human beings add to the climate or enhance it? So if you remember correctly, in primary school and even high school, we would learn about what they call the greenhouse effect, which is basically a natural blanket of gases that are surrounding the Earth, and their main job is to help contain some of the energy that is absorbed by the planet from the sun in order to keep a certain temperate warming of the planet. Otherwise, the Earth would be a freezing ball. So in short, we then have started to dig up a lot of these greenhouse gases that would have been stored for millions of years, like carbon dioxide, and therefore we are thickening the size of the blanket from its original composition, and as such we are now forcing the climate to change at a pace that is not natural.
Okay, apart from carbon dioxide, which is also part and parcel of greenhouse gases, which other gases are also included in that greenhouse?
Yeah, so we've got several. We've got hydrofluorocarbon, we've got perfluoro. Some of them are not only dangerous to the climate, but you'll also remember what we call the ozone layer that we studied in school, and some of these gases were specifically harming that area. So other gases would include nitrous oxide, methane, which actually has a higher global warming potential, at least almost 100 times more than carbon dioxide.
I see that methane can also come naturally from animals. Is that so?
Yes, 100%. Especially livestock breeding. If you understand and remember your life science class, you'd know that the digestive system of cattle is completely different. And these ruminant activities then allow gases to be produced whenever they redigest food, and these gases, like methane in this particular case, is emitted.
Yes. So speaking of greenhouse gases, actually, you can comment below which other greenhouse gases can actually affect or contribute to climate change. So, Mr. Dion, do you think there is climate change here in Namibia, or is it only maybe in other part of the country, of the world?
How I'll answer that question, I'll use a statement from the UN Climate Change Convention, where all governments come together to tackle the problem.
Okay.
Its first preambular statement says that it acknowledges that climate change is a common concern for all of humankind. So what that means is climate change is something that we all on the planet should be worried about because it affects us all. So yes, Namibia is one of the most affected countries when it comes to climate change.
Did you hear what he has said? He said climate change is a global thing. It's not just a Namibian thing. So it's best you keep your eyes here. Okay, so Mr. Dion, or Dion to say, what really causes, if you're saying that climate change is here in Namibia, what is causing climate change?
So there's two elements here. The one is the cause and the other is the effect.
Okay.
Namibia has little to do with the cause. Historically, if we look at the timetable of global greenhouse gas emissions, we would account them mostly in the northern hemisphere of the planet, meaning that developed countries in particular are mainly responsible for the climate that we are currently facing. In particular, it means the effects of the emissions they've been doing for many years are only being felt in our generation. That's the first thing. And then in terms of effect, we are sitting geographically in a location that makes us very susceptible and vulnerable to these climate impacts. And as such, how you cause climate change, as I go back, it has to do with your effects on the greenhouse gases and how you impact the natural cyclical patterns of the earth cooling and warming itself. And in that case, it has to do with gases. Now, if you remember your periodic table in physical science class, it tells you that these are the elements that are known that we have discovered, and almost everything on this planet either comes from a part or a combination of those elements on the periodic table, like oxygen is there, hydrogen is there, and so forth. So some of the activities we are doing on the planet are creating either a combination of stronger gases or are releasing a lot of these gases at a higher rate.
Okay, so speaking about developed countries that are causing more climate change, don't you think that us Namibians, we are also contributing to climate change?
Yes, of course. How I was explaining what we were when this process was being started, we didn't have enough industries. But times have changed now. We are now not anymore just an affected country. We are now also a causal player in this whole agenda. So according to the business as usual projections and scenarios of the Namibian climate change projections, we are probably going to increase our greenhouse gas emissions, and we have to start planning to reduce them, because as your economy grows, so does your consumption of energy, and energy at this point in our current global system is reliant upon fossil fuels, which are the sources for the greenhouse gases. So until the world has a system from which our energy comes from clean energy, every economic activity will be directly or indirectly contributing to a more release of these gases, and as such, that is how Namibia can potentially also become a net sink to a net emitter of greenhouse gases.
Okay, speaking about Namibia, what are we actually doing to curb? Because if you look at it, I've seen that seasons have changed. We have been speaking in the studio, or we spoke in the studio that now seasons have changed. Summers are now warmer, winters are now more colder. So, which other effects are we currently seeing apart from loss of productivity, loss of agriculture, and the season which have changed? If you have any comments or any answer to this, you can always comment below. But Mr. Shekuza, or let me just say Dion, now what can we do as an individual and also as a government? What can we do to curb climate change?
First of all, I think there's two questions in your question. Like, what are we doing, and then what more can we do about it?
So we can tackle one question, like, what are we doing? Is the country, or are we doing enough to mitigate climate change? And the last question is, what can we do?
Yes, Namibia, first of all, is a signatory to the UN Climate Change Framework Convention. This is the ultimate rule-setting framework in the world that decides and designs how we respond to climate. And that means that we have contributed already by acceding ourselves and ratifying.
Yes.
It means that the country is acknowledging that this is a common problem and we want to see how we can solve that. We should give ourselves applaud for that. That means every single year we send a team from Namibia that follows these climate negotiations to contribute and make sure that whatever is adopted speaks to the realities and context of what we are facing. And secondly, Namibia also in 1992, when the world came together for the first time to figure out how are we actually going to deal with all these environmental issues, looking at biodiversity losses, looking at land degradation, desertification, and then climate change. There, Namibia went with what was called the Green Plan, and we took this plan to the world saying this is how we plan to make Namibia greener and contribute also our fair share. And within that plan, the government had made certain commitments that will eventually lead, for example, in 2011, we would adopt our national climate change policy. And then that would be followed by a national climate change strategy and action plan, which then expired most recently in 2020, I believe. And then we replaced that with what's called a nationally determined contribution, which is basically each government's plan on how they are going to keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees according to the global agreements. And so we as a country have set the laws, we have agreed to join international conventions, and then we also at the same time have established a fund which is particularly going to fund environmentally related activities. We've also for those that don't know, the fund is called the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia, which is a government act that established it. And we also then ensured that activities that require finances on the environment are following the polluter pays principle, meaning Namibia introduced environmental levies so that wherever we are doing harm to the environment, we get a tax from it and we put that money back, for example, into the fund.
That's correct, because if you look at it, you cannot just get or grab any plastic, you have to buy for it. So that's what we call environmental levy. Speaking of that, we do not only have the acts or the policies that Namibia has introduced. You were speaking also about the projects that are introduced. Can you tell us more a little bit of these type of projects that are introduced to curb climate change?
There's so many in the agriculture sector, in the forestry sector, in the energy sector, and also other equally important sectors. We have established several programs. For example, they had a program called SCORE, which is basically looking at resilience on the ground for communities and building food capacity and livestock commodities, like looking into modification of seeds in order to ensure some of these seeds are drought resistant and are able to require less water. For example, Namibia has already been doing that. We're now looking into creating a seed bank so that we can actually have more scientific awareness around how to enhance this. We also have forestry projects, one called Nafola.
Which tell us more about Nafola. I almost reminded you about that one.
So Nafola is basically a project that is run by the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. That is why you've seen also the forestry department move from the Ministry of Agriculture to the Ministry of Environment, because climate and forestry have become very closely connected, whether it's in the form of storing carbon or whether it's in the form of ensuring that trees remain on the land in order to cool down the temperatures, because heat is also one of the climate effects that will definitely face Namibia, because we already know we get about 300 days of sunshine. So you can only imagine with an increase in the heat how much more that will affect us. Trees also ensure that water is stored because their roots and taps hold water, so the ground around that becomes fertile. So the Nafola project is going into rural communities and looking into how to use ecosystem-based adaptation methodologies to conserve the forest, but also empower local communities, and from agroforestry, agroecology, and all of these different elements.
Just to add on what he said about trees, we are going to have a campaign of planting trees here, and we want you to stick around. Thank you very much, Shekuza, for making time out of your schedule to come and share a lot of information with us here about climate change.
You're most welcome. That is the commitment I made years back when I chose to be an advocate because I knew that young people require a special attention, and they require somebody who understands their realities to make climate change a relevant topic to them. So I have to thank you for taking the time out to try and educate the youth. And I believe years from now, young Namibians will be very grateful that we did not overlook their role in this very serious issue. And I wish you well moving further on.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about what me and you can do to curb climate change.
So first thing that we can do to combat climate change is
we need to recycle. As we were speaking about plastics, actually, let's continue to recycle as well as the cans, and let's reuse our plastic bags. Thanks to the government that we have, we are now paying for these plastic bags, and we are reusing them, and which is a good thing.
Yes, and please make sure, guys, that you are turning off sockets and electricity outlets, or switching off the lights or any electronical devices if you aren't using them, or when you're leaving the house. It's okay to leave one on, at least for security.
And we also need to plant trees. Let's reforestate. As in our show, we are going also to talk about plant a tree, or we're gonna have a plant a tree campaign, and we want you to be part of it.
Exactly. So this is definitely not the end. We will be going more in depth next week with climate.
Next week, same time,
same place.
Yes, as from me, Esther,
and me, Sharissa.
It's a thought out.
Bye.